Hi everyone, welcome to Mind Matters. This is an Instagram live series where every Tuesday we talk about various different aspects of mental health and how it affects people across different walks of life, from children and young adults to homemakers as well as sports people. A key issue when it comes to mental health care, and something that we've been noticing a lot of people talk about as well, is the lack of accessibility and affordability. And today we thought we'd address just that issue. So joining us today would be iCall Helpline, which is a free telephone and email-based counseling service run by the School of Human Ecology, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. From iCall Helpline, we have joining us today Dr. Aparna Joshi. She's an assistant professor at the School of Human Ecology, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and she's also the project director of iCall. Along with her, joining us today would be Tanuja Babre. She is the program coordinator for iCall and also a mental health practitioner. So without waiting any further, let me add them to this conversation. Right. And hi Tanuja.
Hi, Nani.
Okay, I'm just adding
Yes.
iCall as well. Is some issue. Is there a setting with?
Are you able to add Dr. Aparna, or I can check with her quickly?
Can you check with her, because I can't seem
Yes.
to add her? Maybe she can send me a request. For some
Yeah.
reason, it's not showing up in the windows. Okay, to all the users watching us, please stick around. It seems to be a technical glitch. Maybe if she can send us a request, I think that might help.
I'm going to just exit the live, Nani, and then
Sure.
you can add me again. I will
Okay.
just figure this out.
Okay, sure. We're just going to wait. All right, everyone. So there seems to be a technical glitch. In the meantime, why don't we have our viewers send us some questions? Someone just said we don't know how to use it. Unfortunately, that's not very accurate. We do. Sadly, there is a technical glitch. So, yeah. Great. Can we keep having some questions? I know we're going to address those very, very shortly. Yeah, someone's asked what the topic is about. So we're going to be talking about making mental health care more accessible and more affordable, which is something that is a major issue given how expensive mental health care ends up being, not just in India, but globally as well. Okay. think Tanuja is back. Let me.
Hi, Nani.
Okay, hi.
Just see if you're able to add her now.
I still haven't received a request.
Can you try adding, because she's on the live?
I call a headline. Yes, finally found it. For some reason, it wasn't showing up, and I know the handle because I follow you guys, and it just didn't turn up. But yeah, I think we've managed. Thank you everyone for sticking around. Hello, Dr. Aparna.
Hi.
Even after
I think technology,
multiple dry runs, things just go wrong at the last minute. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to turn off comments. I can't. Okay, never mind. I think I'm just going to let this be. Once you've joined, I can't seem to do it. You know, I'm just having a bad day. Okay, hope that doesn't distract us, and we'll just get right to it without wasting any more time. Like I was telling all our viewers, that we're going to be discussing, the issue of how mental health care in India, and not only in India, globally, is extremely inaccessible and also very expensive. So, why don't we start by understanding why this is? And the second part of the question is that for those who need affordable mental health care today, what are some existing resources that are available that one can reach out to? Dr. Aparna, if you can take this question.
Sure. Thank you, Naini, and apologies for joining late. I think, technology is a hard nut to crack. So, but I think to begin with, I think, why is mental health not so accessible and affordable across the globe, and not just, in India, but more so in India? I think let's deep dive into it. First of all, I think it has definitely got to do with the dearth of available professionals. I mean, if you look at it, to simplify numbers, maybe we have less than one mental health professional for 1 lakh people.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think we are talking about a very skewed ratio with a huge demand, but very few people who are willing to provide services.
Okay.
Also, I think mental health care is so privatized because the public health infrastructure that provides mental health services is virtually non-existent in some parts of the world and India. So which means I think it's largely private players who are providing this kind of a service, which brings the costs of mental health service up very, very high. And therefore it makes it very perhaps unaffordable. I think the skewed ratio makes it inaccessible to people.
Okay.
Some of the mental health problems also are long term, so they cannot be resolved with perhaps one session or one conversation, and therefore it becomes an incurring cost for people. Plus, we don't have standardization, regularization of mental health care in India, especially of psychotherapy or counseling services, which means anybody can claim that they are a counselor and can provide services and charge whatever they wish to charge.
Yeah.
There's no insurance. So I think there are several issues that make mental health care inaccessible and unaffordable. But what is it that can be done also? I think that's also very important, because especially given the pandemic and the kind of mental health issues or distress, I think it has increased in society. I think it's very important to talk about what can people do. I think the good news is that not all mental health problems or not all distress requires therapy or medication. I think there is a lot that the individual can do at their own level. And one of the first things, and we are going to talk hopefully about what can people do to take care of their mental health and that of others. I think one of the biggest issue is to acknowledge that there is distress. I think there's a huge stigma in our country to even acknowledge that there is a problem that exists within me or my family. So I think once you do that, maybe for example, World Health Organization also says that many of these mental health concerns can be just taken care by self-care measures or informal care measures such as family, community. So having good social networks, maybe support groups, conversation groups, or some self-help measures can make people believe that there is something that they can do to take charge of their lives. And despite that, if you're still required to talk to professionals or other care providers, then I think happy to know that there are a lot of helplines, for example, which are being floated in India and which are reaching out to people, a lot of online support groups which are reaching out to people, or there are many other forms of care that are available also. So I would suggest that these are the range of options that are available for people.
Absolutely. Tanuja, coming to you, what can be done to make mental health care globally more accessible and affordable?
So I think some of those points Aparna has already spoken about. One is, of course, the stigma around mental health, especially in India, is something that keeps people from seeking help at the right time. So help is really sought when there is a greater, the intensity of mental health concerns might be higher. So if we look at the continuum of mental health, and if we say health is on one side and illness is on one side, there is distress in between, which all of us experience time and again, given whatever is going on in our lives. So if we address concerns when it's in the form of distress and not a symptom, it's much more easier to tackle those. Now, if you look at the optimal care of response in terms of mental health care or in terms of mental health support, the model itself, which WHO speaks about, as Aparna was saying, on the very basic thing, it says that self-care and community care, informing community, teaching communities about how to take care of themselves, how to be aware, what are mental health concerns, what is distress, is something that we need the most. We don't need most in terms of the highest number of inputs are not required in terms of trained professionals or hospitals, but the most amount of inputs are required in people learning to take care of themselves and communities accommodating care such as this. Next on to that is our community cadres in terms of, it could be our ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, doctors who are working in PHCs, CHCs, district hospitals, formal and informal staff, non-medical and medical staff, who is not necessarily mental health care or psychiatric staff, right? Teaching them to not only recognize mental health concerns, but also at the same time teaching them on how to respond and offer psychological first aid, or to recognize signs of distress and then offer appropriate mental health and non-mental health support resources. And then comes the third part of training more psychiatrists, psychologists, psychiatric social workers to respond to care. So if we look at a cascading model like this, then the number of people who are immediately going to the psychiatrist, which are anyways few in numbers, is much lesser. We are creating multiple layers within community and within the health system to address the mental health burden. In addition to that, something which is very important is that not only to address mental health problems in form of intervention, but the need to address mental health problems for prevention as well as promotion of mental health, right? We are just addressing mental health problems once there's a diagnosis, but we are not talking about mental health just to prevent. What is it that can be done? And especially if you look at a country like India, mental health is very closely linked to people's psychosocial reality, their social reality and their life realities. So in form of housing, in form of employment, all of these things contribute to mental health, right? So the promotion and prevention work can focus on addressing mental health at all of these different points. And then second, mental health is a cross-cutting issue. It's not that it is just limited to psychiatry, or it's not that it's just limited to people who have diagnosis, but if there is violence, that still causes mental health distress. If there is joblessness, that still causes mental health distress. If there is homelessness, poverty, all of these things cause mental health distress, right?
Absolutely.
So these are certain broader factors. But if we look at making it again more affordable, certain inputs in terms of, for example, iCall uses technology very, very heavily. In a country where we don't have enough trained professionals, technology allows us to reach out to a very high number of people with a limited pool of trained professionals. we're also seeing a lot more models which use task shifting the task of caring and mental health burden from very qualified, niche, trained professionals like psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, psychiatric social workers, to medical and non-medical and paramedical staff. To sort of how is that first level of care can be offered over here, and then a specific need of care can be pushed to somebody who's more qualified. So these are some of the ways which we can consider, and some of the directions in which work is also happening in India, which is making mental health more accessible and affordable.
Definitely, definitely. And when it comes to affordability, Dr. Aparna, is treatment for mental health care, is it covered under the general health insurance that one buys? If you can kind of explain the,
Sure.
explain that very simply to our audience.
Yeah. And I think that there is good news over there, because the Mental Health Care Act that is cleared in 2017 has made it mandatory for insurance companies to treat mental illness at par with physical illness, and sort of offer similar kind of insurance benefits that are offered for physical illnesses. Yeah. So actually, if you look at the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority, India has already passed this kind of regulatory mechanism whereby insurance companies have been told to do this. So on paper, I think that's a great news. But of course, I think in any country, from a policy or a plan to actual implementation, I think there are lots of issues. And happy news again is there are maybe 2 or 3 insurance companies that have already started including mental illness as one of the category that is covered under health insurance. So that's good. But as I said, that the problems are still there, because one is, I think, the standard of ascertaining risk in health related issues or problems is already established, because health insurance companies have been doing that for a very, very long time. But how do you assess that risk for mental illnesses is yet being ascertained. Also, largely this insurance is covered for inpatient care. Right, and if you look at mental health problems, they cover a huge gamut, starting from something like anxiety disorders to depression to dementia to schizophrenia and other severe illnesses also. Not everything requires hospitalization, right? Maybe something can be cleared just by talking to a therapist, something requires medication, and something requires hospitalization. So maybe almost 14% of people in India may be suffering from anxiety and depression, and they may not go to a hospital, but they definitely require therapy, which is, so OPD treatments, therapy is still not covered under insurance in India. I think this requires some amount of advocacy. So private companies are doing this. Government has also taken steps under government health insurance schemes to cover mental health. Long way to go, because we spend less than 1% of our health budget on mental health. So you can imagine. But I think one of the positive steps is there is a provision, and I think with great awareness, insurance, I think universal health coverage is a distant dream, but I think we will move towards that. And I think as awareness increases, people will start asking insurance companies also for these rights which have been given now by the Mental Health Care Act. So yeah, let's see how this goes.
Let's hope for that, definitely. And my next question is for you, Tanuja. And it's a 2-part question. The first one being that our free helplines, the ones that are available, and iCall being one of them, is it really a sustainable model in the long run? And the second part being, what kind of government as well as private party intervention is required to come up with a sustainable and robust model for the long run for the mental health infrastructure in the country?
Right. So in a way, if we look at free services which are available, of course, they add a great value to people, for people to be able to access mental health care. And it sort of goes beyond many barriers, right? There is stigma. People may have limitations in terms of accessing services. Even if you look at good quality ethical mental health professionals, you'll be able to easily find them in cities like Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, but you won't be able to find them in a rural village of UP or Madhya Pradesh or something like that, right? So free services such as these create a possibility for people to access good quality ethical services across barriers of caste, class, gender, geography, even language. For example, iCall is a multilingual service. So that is something that these services make possible for people who don't, especially for people who don't have access to services. Now, in addition to that, when we look at the stigma around mental health, many of these services offer anonymity and confidentiality, which are very key because a lot of times people, communities, families carry a lot of shame when it comes to talking about mental health concerns, right? It's a sensitive topic. So the anonymity and the confidentiality really helps people in reaching out and in speaking to a professional and seeking help in time. At the same time, services such as these allow for a greater expansion and cater to a large number of people with limited amount of investment, or with investment which is significantly lesser. If you invest in hospitals, if you invest in counseling centers, they would reach very limited people within that space. Now, this is not to say that these services are enough in addressing the mental health care gap. They are crucial. They're doing a great job in terms of bridging the gap, but they are not enough. So this is where the whole aspect in terms of what role do public and private partnerships have to play when we're looking at creating a good, robust mental health care system. So one is that these services, of course, have to be supplemented by very robust multi-sectoral referrals, because while services are online, people's needs are not always online. They might be offline in form of legal aid centers, in terms of police stations, in terms of care for their children, in terms of health care, medications, vaccinations, so many different things. So these services have to be equipped in connecting people to these requirements which might be offline, and that's not only limited to mental health, and that's the issue that we're talking about. Mental health is a cross-cutting issue, right? So mental health should not only give referrals for psychiatric treatment or hospitalization or community care or rehabilitation center, but psychosocial care truly should really build in referrals in terms of legal aid, in terms of financial debt counseling, in terms of if there are students who need assistance in terms of admissions, career guidance, or things such as these, right? When we look at these public-private partnerships, there is a very huge scope in terms of governments to look at what are the models which are innovative, which are sustainable, which are doing well in terms of good mental health care, especially good community mental health care. And then so there is a very important requirement, or at least I feel that there is a scope for knowledge sharing in a very good way for both parties to learn from each other. As iCall, we really believe that governments will always have the widest amount of reach when it comes to care. Even if we have 2 iCall or 10 iCall, we'll never be able to reach what a government helpline can reach. So therefore, our role as a not-for-profit agency becomes to work in collaboration with government structures to strengthen, to build more such systems, replicate, and to look at sustainable expansion. So knowledge sharing in form of best practices, knowledge sharing in form of capacity building, knowledge sharing to be even able to create innovations within this area is something which is very crucial.
Right. Aparna, coming back to you, what are some of the challenges that iCall faces in trying to make mental health care more accessible and affordable?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think iCall is making mental health services accessible and affordable to people. And it's a very modest attempt. As Tanuja said, 10 iCalls will be never, sufficient to address such a huge gap. But of course, I mean, I think it's full of challenges. Let's start, first of all, with accessibility, right? So while technology offers a huge opportunity in terms of reaching out to maybe the most interior parts of the country also, and regardless, and it offers the control over health to the caller actually. So that's fantastic. Callers can decide when is it that they want to reach. We offer also help in different mediums. So if you don't want to call us, you can email us. If you don't want to email us, we used to offer chat services. So definitely, I think increases accessibility. But let me tell you that accessibility, I mean, surveys in India say that 1 in 3 people have access to telephone. So it should be good. But you also know that not everybody in the same house has equal access to that telephone. Maybe women may not have that access. Young children or young people may not have that access, and men and older people. So I think that's a huge barrier, number one. People may have access, but they don't know how to use technology, which is another challenge. So people may not have privacy. We realized during COVID, people wanted to reach out to us, but because all the family members within the same space, people could not, they were worried about, are they being heard by other people? What if they are heard? What will be the consequences? So these are challenges to accessibility. Language is a barrier. Tanuja said that we offer, for example, services in 10 different languages, but India speaks 200 languages. So we have to actually have those many counselors who speak those, and there are dialects. So that also poses sort of challenges to accessibility. So these are some of the issues and also accessibility has to be tied with quality, right? Because you can bring 100 people into iCall, but will those 100 people, bring that level of quality, which means they have to have training, they have to have qualifications, they need to have supervision. And one more aspect that I want to talk about, which is hard, very neglected, that people are talking about care providers providing care to the community, but what about the care for care providers? Psychologists or psychiatrists or mental health professionals are human beings too. So iCall is one of the organizations which believes in caring for care providers, which means burnout is a huge issue. So I think it's not just accessibility, but what kind of care that is offered by services like iCall, and these are huge challenges. So which means we want to expand the service, but it has to be done in a very careful manner. And affordability, let me be very honest that our services are free, but the call is not toll free. And, that is also one of the challenges that we did 2 national level consultations, learned from several helplines and made this choice of not going toll free. So which means people actually have to pay for the call. It is very cheap and, but to maintain salaries, funding is a huge issue in mental health. Education, women's issue, children are sectors where funding is available. People understand. Physical health, people understand how to, why. Mental health care, people don't understand requires funding. But COVID, I think, has brought forth the issues of mental health to the foreground. And I'm hoping that just as, mental health is seeing better sort of visibility, mental health funding will also have better days in India. So these are some of the challenges, and we are trying our level best to deal with some of them.
And absolutely, and I think this series that we're doing every Tuesday, which is Mind Matters, is also an attempt to make conversations around mental health more, normalized, even though the pandemic has helped, like you rightly said, but, get people talking about it. So very much on point. Sure. Tanuja, coming back to you, speaking of the pandemic, can you talk a little about the kind of work that iCall is doing, especially has done during the pandemic via some case studies and anecdotes, that you guys have come across?
Right. So a majority of the work that we have been doing, while iCall is a mental health service, a mental health and psychosocial support service, but in addition to that, we also work in the area of research, we work in the area of capacity building of other mental health professionals, other services, other partners as well, and we also work in the area of content creation, self-help content for people's mental well-being, for those who want to access, or just general awareness. During the pandemic specifically, I think some of the key projects that we have focused on through iCall is, of course, the kind of people that we have been reaching out to. So we have had to significantly increase, Aparna was just speaking about expansion, but we have had to increase the number of counselors who respond to calls, because the inflow has been higher than ever before. We have seen a number of emails coming in which have been higher than never before in our 8-9 years of work that we have done so far. So there was a very, very high demand that we started seeing. So to cater to that demand, we also started seeing that people were not only coming in for mental health, but because, especially due to COVID, many of practical requirements, migrant workers who want to travel back home, frontline workers who are really stressed and, spread thin in terms of their own resources, people who may have lost job, people who may have lost family members. We started recognizing that these very specific needs are coming in from certain groups. So we initiated a special COVID psychosocial support line to address queries related to COVID. We also initiated a special line called Swasthi for frontline workers such as doctors, nurses, Asha, Anganwadi workers, sanitation workers, community workers who continued to work throughout the pandemic, because they were essential workers, right? So they had very specific kind of needs. In addition to that, we worked with a lot of our humanitarian agencies who are partners, such as UNICEF, UNFPA, UNDP, to create various IC material. To sort of, how do you respond to children in terms of mental health care, or what are the needs of children and adolescents, young people, what are the needs of specific community workers, how do you have a conversation with somebody who is going through domestic violence. So we have been doing a lot of this work with many of these partners. We have also been training special groups, say on addressing gender-based violence, because we saw a very high rise on issues such as these. So training counselors across various states in the country on addressing gender-based violence, and especially how to do that telephonically or online. We have been training helplines on or various services which are already available within the government system on how to offer online services.
Yeah.
So that is some of the work that we have been doing. We also felt that it was really important to study what has been the psychosocial impact of the pandemic on people's minds. So we have been carrying out some longitudinal study, some smaller researches to look at our own data and to study the issue further. But now bringing this all down to how has this translated in our services. So we have really received very diverse kind of calls. There have been calls or emails, chats related to COVID related requirements, right? People needing practical support. There have been cases whereby there have been family members who have said that, or children who have been stuck away from family and are in crisis. We have had requests from migrant workers who don't know how to go back home, people who are afraid of job loss, losing a family member, grief, students who had their whole year planned in front of them, and now, those plans have sort of changed drastically. So the anxiety related to that. We've also been getting a lot of crisis concern, people who are feeling vulnerable, sometimes even suicidal, or wanting to engage in self-harm due to the circumstances in their lives, or high levels of domestic violence, sexual abuse. These are also the kind of concerns that our counselors have been addressing. We have been getting calls from marginalized communities, persons who might be recognizing as LGBTQIA, and been forced to move back home, or been caught up with at homes which are not essentially safe spaces for everyone. So these are also the kind of concerns that we have been catering to. All in all, we have tried to help people get appropriate information, create a safe holding space to talk, to just share lot of disclosures in terms of just how disconnected and lonely people are feeling in the middle of all of this. So we have tried to create a safe holding space for people to speak in a non-judgmental manner, to help build internal as well as external resources for people on how is it that they can take care of themselves. Sometimes requests in terms of that my family member is going through this, what should I do? So supporting people through that, and connecting people to multiple referrals, resources in whichever form that they're available, because services are open today, tomorrow there is a lockdown, they're not open. So our counselors have to continuously work on updating their knowledge and databases to ensure that they offer appropriate kind of referrals and inputs to people.
Absolutely. And Dr. Aparna, if you can sort of address this, would ICOL consider expanding to beyond just an email and a telephonic helpline? And I mean, talk a little about what your plans are going forward.
Yeah, I think every year, every minute, I think we are learning from the kind of calls we get, the kind of conversations that we are having with people. So a few things which we are noticing is, one is, I think, expansion in terms of the modalities through which technology is used to reach people. Yeah? So for example, definitely, as I said, that while some people like calling, some people, and especially we are realizing young people are more savvy, more comfortable perhaps texting about their life issues rather than talking about their life issues. So definitely I think there are plans to add chat, and maybe some people are not okay just having this anonymity and confidentiality, and they want to see their therapist, they want to see their counselor. So we are also hoping to start maybe video conferencing facility. So I think there's a basket or a cafeteria of choices available for people based on their comfort. So that's definitely a plan to add modalities so that people have greater control over their mental health. There are also plans to increase counselors. I can tell you, like, I think if we put 100 counselors also, I think that would still not suffice the kind of call flow or the email flow. I think there are plans to expand the counselor force along with the expansion of modalities, adding new languages. In a country like India, people feel connected to when they talk to their professional, not just on the basis of the competence of the professional, but whether the professional talks their language, that dialect, whether the professional understands that particular culture. I think those are the things that put the person at ease, creates a good relationship. I think we will try to add some more languages also to our portfolio. So in terms of maybe try out chatbots, different kinds of artificial intelligence based technology that is also coming up. So that is in terms of service expansion or working evolution. But I would also say that apart from service provision, I think there are 2-3 other areas where ICOL is definitely trying to work upon. One is, I think, working in terms of capacity enhancement, because one ICOL, as I said, that will never suffice these kinds of needs. So I think we need to build capacities of people who are interacting with, for example, teachers are already interacting with students in a different capacity, but I can't tell you the number of students who go to teachers and talk about not just educational things, but also about their vulnerability. So building capacities of different people and different cadres of maybe helping professionals or helping individuals. So capacity enhancement is an area. The third area that we are working is none of services are likely to work if people don't know about mental health issues. So creating mental health awareness is another area where ICOL is definitely trying to expand into, and creating content which is user friendly, very easily understandable, nothing full of jargon, relatable to people, and in multiple languages. Everybody talks English, whereby, actually very few people in society can talk English. So creating vernacular content is also very, very important. So these are, I would say, some of the plans, and we always work in partnerships. If ICOL decides to implement all of these things, we will never be able to reach out. So working with governments, working with educational institutions, civil society organizations, and maybe UN organizations also are some of the ways in which we hope that some of these strategies can be implemented. Those are
right. Great. I think in terms of the questions that I had, I think that's the list that we had. I think we've already kind of overshot our time, so I'm going to take one question and club it together. I mean, there were a bunch of questions which came in, so let's just club it together in one question, which is, what can I do to take care of my mental health, and how do I take care of others' mental health care, and how do I practice self-love? If any one of you can kind of answer that.
Yeah. I can start, and then Aparna can add on to this. I think one of the first things when we are looking at especially taking care of our own selves and our own mental health is, I think, first of all, to reflect and become aware about how does our body respond to stress, what does mental health, good mental health and bad mental health looks like to ourselves, because different people react differently for in terms of when they're under stress or when they're experiencing mental health difficulties. So reflecting on what does mental health look like to ourselves, recognizing these signs and building resources, building support systems, accessing services, be it ICOL, be it your formal, informal care systems, but really reaching out when you think you need support, and when you are reaching out to sort of for support for yourself, then there is no shame, there is no stigma related to it. Just the way that you do this for physical health, or if you have a toothache, you would not hesitate in going to a dentist, and others would not hesitate in recommending that you go to a dentist. Similarly, for mental health, that is something which is a very normal thing, and that is something that should be done by people. And when we are able to do that is when we are able to reverse many of these impact that stress is creating in our lives. But in addition to those three things, I also want to say that it's very important to just in general, especially in a time like this, focus on our self-care, right? So don't wait to create a mental health care routine or regime till the point that you get distress, but just physically, like the way you say that good nutritious food, working out is good for your health. Similarly, taking certain steps for your mental health, saying no to things that cause distress, drawing boundaries, doing things, and be it, just taking breaks for yourself. We have a habit of taking a leave when we are sick, but then taking a leave when you're not feeling emotionally well, or just taking a leave to take rest and do nothing. So doing things for your own self-care, and in whatever way that self-care looks like to you, is really important in focusing on your own mental health care. And when you do that for yourself, I also want to say that you demonstrate caring for yourself for other people also in your immediate circle, and that often becomes an example for other people to feel inspired to focus on their mental health. But yeah, if Aparna could come in how can we take...
Sure. Yeah, I'm mindful of the time, so I'll just try to be as brief as possible.
Yes.
And I will definitely try to talk about how can you help others. I think by taking care of yourself, first step is you can then be ready to take care of others. Number two, definitely, I think if you are helping others, always remember that the help should be provided by maintaining the person's dignity. Yeah? What is, different people want help in different ways. Your definition of help does not match necessarily their definition of help. Sometimes you want them to talk, sometimes you want them to vent, maybe they just prefer silence. They just want to know that there is somebody around them who can be accessed whenever they want. I think maybe helping others could be that. Noticing simple changes in people's behavior and letting them know that you are around. Checking on people once in a while. I think that is becoming See, within the first wave, everybody was getting on Zoom, Insta, Facebook, trying to connect. Now people are so fatigued. There is empathy fatigue also which is setting in, and we have forgotten to check on each other. So maybe just calendar every Sunday, 2 phone calls to people who I haven't talked to for a very long time, and just telling them that I remembered you might be helpful. And when people you think require serious kind of help, just maybe slipping in a helpline number. They may not use it immediately. They may use it maybe a month later. But letting people know that you care, and your care can be tailored to how they want to receive care, is very, very important, so that their dignity is maintained. Just one last thing I want to say. At home, helping women, dividing work, avoiding triggers, because people are staying together, lots of fights, conflicts. So dividing work, creating some simple rituals so that there is enjoyable time for family, for relationships. And whenever you know that conflicts are going to escalate, maybe walking out of that situation, taking some deep breath can also help maintain peace at home.
Definitely. I think that's a great way to end this conversation on. Thank you, Dr. Aparna, and thank you, Tanuja. It was a really, really insightful conversation. And thank you to all our viewers who stuck around, and thanks for sending in questions. We will be back with She Matters next Tuesday. And thank you all so very much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, take care. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.